Well, every road I see leads away from me. There's not a single one that leads me home. The road keeps saying, friend, come see what's round the bend. So is it any wonder that I roam? All the places I have been keep calling me back again. Down in the pines I hear the cold winds blow. My heart keeps telling me, footloose and fancy free, and the road goes by and calls me as it goes. Well, maybe somewhere there's a someone waiting with a smile, and maybe there'll be some place I can stop and rest a while. And maybe you weren't meant to be just a rolling stone, and there's a road to travel on that leads you back to home. So hello, everybody out there. Guess what? Temporarily, it's just me. Duke just got home. Evidently, he had a fight with the Laramie River, and the Laramie River won. And so, if you guys can hear me good, let me know. I'm working on this microphone here, but and he will be here just momentarily. But for the moment, it's just you and me. So I'm going to go through who all we have here. Task Force Tyler's here. Hi. By Land and Sea says, howdy, y'all. FWI 1298 said, hi. And Louisiana Gray is in here. Stephen M. Mann's here. Oregon Outback said he got to string a new telegraph line from Kansas up to Fort Laramie. Yeah, it kind of seems that way. Doug Dukes is in. Stephen M. Mann. William Schlosser is in here. Diane Houston. Gray Pilgrim's here. Hi, Gray. CBJW, that's Caleb, is in. And Snapper is in. Thank you, Snapper. He said I did a great job on that video. And let's see. Harmony Moss is in. Hey, Harmony. I haven't seen you for a while. Let's see. Yes, Duke is okay. I believe he just got a little wet. A little muddy. Angelica Woods is in here. 50 TNCSA says howdy, and old one guy is here. All right, guys, so we're doing Red Cloud's War Part 2 tonight, just as soon as Duke gets here. But anything you got to say right now, I guess throw it out there, and we'll have a conversation until he gets here. He wanted me to sing for you guys, but my guitar's out of tune tonight, and so am I. So anyway, go through some of these questions here. Stephen M. Mann asks, has anyone been getting my videos? Yes, I actually have gotten your videos. Unfortunately, I just haven't had time to watch them yet. I got a list of them back in my subscriptions, and I will be getting around to watching them. I haven't been able to really answer phone calls this week. I know Gray Pilgrim sent me several emails I got to answer and some other people, but I've just been way behind this week on all that stuff, and I promise you guys I'll get caught up with that. Show us your weapons. Well, they're right there on the wall, right there behind me. Diane Houston said, hello, everybody. Gray Pilgrim said, sorry, I've not been posting much lately. I'm about to remedy that. Well, that's good because on the 11 Bang Bang channel, we're about to stop posting for about a month. We're about to go into our end of the year, June. Our actual year starts in July. And we go cut a little bit of wheat, even though there's not a lot out there this year. We will do that in June. And so we're not going to be posting much, but it sounds like Gray Pilgrim's going to be taking up the slack. Okay. Snapper said, yeah, I love this song. Garrett did a great job singing it. Yeah, it's not a copyrighted song, but it's actually, I didn't write that one. That is from Bonanza. It's a song Hoyt Axton did. Him and Pernell Roberts sing it together on Bonanza and did a great job. But wasn't a copyrighted song, and it's one of my favorites, so I went ahead and recorded it. Hear me fine, thanks. All right, good, thank you very much. That means we're ready to go. Just call you TN, it makes things easier. Stephen M. Mann said this time of year starts high water season for the Rockies. Yeah, I don't know exactly what was going on with Duke, but I know that he got a little bit behind, and it had something to do with a river. Oh, you lost a bidding war for an 1881 Forager? That wasn't the... I think I know which one it was. It started out at about $300, and I thought about it and could not afford it. It wasn't... Yeah, I think I know which one you're talking about. I was watching it too, but I didn't bid on it because I couldn't afford it at the moment. If you guys didn't know, the 1881 Forager is a trapdoor shotgun issued to the Army. Kind of a cool thing. Yeah, Snapper, that's a horn cup that was made for me by a guy up at Fort Larned, here at Fort Larned, Kansas. And I've been using it ever since then. It's a really nice cup, good for live streams. Yeah, a guy, he's kind of a guy that watches the channel and stuff up there, and I wound up getting that cup from him. I think he actually sells some up there too. Snapper, Justin Kuhn wants to know if you'll do an 1877 teardown video. Yeah, do that, Snapper. Duke says just a few more minutes. He's got to get his britches on. Gray Pilgrim said, I live for my 11 Bang Bang videos. Well, thank you, but June might be a little dry. Gray Pilgrim said, yes, I knew Hoyt. Oh, you actually knew Hoyt Axton. Wow. That's Hoyt Axton's one of my favorites. Of course, every time I come up with a song or something from far back or something, Gray Pilgrim will know if it's Mother Maybelle or if it's the Carter family or evidently Hoyt Axton or anybody. He's obviously in the know on that. Snapper said that he will do the teardown video and how each part goes together. Yeah, because they're not... Yeah, Hoyt Axton, great singer-songwriter. Della and the Dealer. And a dog named Jake. Gray Pilgrim got a bayonet for his 1860. A triangle bayonet. That's cool. And Duke's almost here, guys. I promise. And then we'll take off. And that's about it. So we're just waiting on Duke. Oh, there he is. Just in time. About saved us from a catastrophe.
What was the catastrophe?
I about picked up my guitar.
Oh, well, go ahead.
I don't think it's in tune.
That's probably more in tune than mine is.
Oh, yeah, you got one, don't you?
Yeah.
It's not in tune. I got that one, or I got this one's kind of interesting. This one while we're waiting. Yep. I got my grandpa's Gene Autry out too. Are you playing Breaking Out of Jail tonight?
No, and I don't even know if you can hear it. Bangs.
I can kind of hear it.
It's an electric. But I've been trying to work on that Coyote song, and I still got a little bit of figuring out to do.
There we go. Let's go together here. That was not in tune either. I need to tune these things if I'm going to have them sitting around. It's kind of hard to hear them through my headphones.
Yeah.
We'll do that someday. We'll just break out the guitars and do a...
Like I said, I want you to play Coyotes here one of these days because that's one of my favorite songs.
Yeah, I've been working on it, but I haven't got all the words memorized yet.
Yeah.
You're in charge. Right. Send us away.
Yeah, well, just kind of give you an update what's going on. I didn't exactly fall in the river. I got muddy when I was out doing stuff around the river. Basically, I was rolling in dirt doing some welding for a buddy of mine. Then we went fishing, and I was pretty muddy and dirty when I got home.
River 1. I've been through all the comments and everything for the most part.
Okay.
Except for Gots Loco just got in. He said, "Good evening, group. It's light out. I lost track of time."
Yeah, it's getting that time of year. All right. So kind of going to take off where we left off last week. And I got to admit, I didn't get a lot of reading done this week because things just did not play out according to plan.
Looks like you got a haircut, though.
No, I just got out of the shower and I combed my hair back.
Okay.
It's still fairly long. It's just wet. So, and for the record, I'll be sitting down the whole time because no, I didn't have time to get my britches on. But anyway.
Okay. All right. We're off to a great start.
I hope Mama Woods ain't listening.
She's probably laughing right along.
Oh, shoot. So anyway, so I've been into Volume 2 of Red Cloud's War by McDermott. That's kind of what this whole talk's been based off of. And that's why it originally was getting broken down into 2 parts. Now it may have to be 3. Because the other thing tonight I can't because I got opening shift tomorrow, so I can't go real long. But anyway, I'm up to Wagon Box. And so I'm going to go basically off of what I can remember from Wagon Box, and we've talked about this before, from Jerry Keenan's book, The Wagon Box Fight. But I got through the hayfield. And so we're on a good start anyway, but we might have to do part 3 to finish out Red Cloud's War, and I'm not sure when part 3 is going to happen. So to kind of, for those that are just coming in that are new to this, I'm going to do a very brief review and kind of reintroduce the whole thing. So everything's going to kind of pretty well get started for the Indian Wars. It's going to include Red Cloud's War for the Northern Plains down at Fort Laramie in August 1853. That's going to be with the Grattan fight. 1854, with the Grattan fight. Lieutenant John Grattan is going to go arrest a Minneconjou man accused of stealing a cow from a Mormon's. Whether it was stolen, left behind, abandoned, we're not quite sure. What we do know, though, is that the man admitted to killing and eating the cow. And Grattan goes to arrest him, and he refuses to give himself up. And Grattan is going to basically lose patience, and it doesn't help that the interpreter is drunk and not doing a very good job of interpreting. And it's going to blow up. Grattan's 30-man command will fire on, peaceful natives at this point. Mortally wounding Conquering Bear, who had been appointed to represent all of the Lakota under the 1851 Fort Laramie Treaty. And after that happens, Grattan's going to be wiped out. His entire command's wiped out in less than 20 minutes. And that's really going to set the stage for 20-some-odd years of conflict. Following year, Harney will come in and attack a village of Brules that weren't even involved in the Grattan fight. And, he's basically going to have a Shivington-esque massacre on his hands. Although I don't see much record of that involving the mutilations that took place at Sand Creek, but it's going to set the stage. And so it'll set, you'll have what's known as the First Sioux War take place. That'll kind of quiet out a few years of, I won't exactly say peaceful years, a few years of lesser conflict. And as you get into the Civil War years, things are going to start to heat up. Tensions are going to rise once again. In November of 1864, John Shivington's going to attack a peaceful Cheyenne village at Sand Creek under the leader Black Kettle. And that's what's really going to start the snowball, in a sense, that's going to lead into Red Cloud's War. So the following year, 1865, historically known as the Indian War of 1865, is going to start as basically retaliation for Sand Creek. And so the Southern Cheyenne, the Southern Arapaho are going to join with the Oglala with the Northern Cheyenne and Arapaho bands. And initially they're going to attack Julesburg in northern Colorado. Then they'll move north. They'll have the Battle of Mud Springs and Rush Creek. And then they realize that to really escape the presence of the white men, they're going to have to move into the Powder River country. And so they do that. They move north into the Powder River country. And then they continue their warfare on. You're going to have major battle of Platte River Bridge. later on, you're going to have the Tongue River Battle. You're going to have the Connor Expedition, which that's all part of the Tongue River Battle. And basically, it comes down to nobody really wins at the end of that because the natives don't get what they want, which is Shimington hung, and the Army does not quell hostilities by force. And so in 1866, the government decides to try another peace treaty. They gather tribes at Fort Laramie, and one of the items of the peace treaty is to negotiate the opening and safe travel along the Bozeman Trail. And so John Bozeman had blazed this trail earlier in 1860s, about 1863-ish, to get to the Montana goldfields, because to get to them, the more common route before he blazed his trail was to go all the way around through Idaho and then back up into Montana. And that was a long trip. It was a very long trip. And Bozeman realized it could be shortened by going in front of the Bighorn Mountains. Now, Bridger, about the same time, found another trail that went along up past Yellowstone, so along the Wind River Basin, the Bighorn Basin. And even though that trail didn't have any hostilities on it whatsoever, it wasn't as a popular trail. It was a little bit more treacherous. There was a little less water. And so people preferred the Bozeman Trail because it was the quick and easy route.
Wind River's a mighty big range, Iron Belly.
Yeah, it sure is. So the government at this point, there's enough traffic going on that trail, and the natives don't want the traffic on there. They're already acting hostile towards it. And so the government tries to come to a peaceful negotiation over it, because just got done with a civil war. They don't want to continue fighting. The government's in the hole at this point. And so they bring Red Cloud down, several other leaders, and try to negotiate. And Red Cloud, he's willing to meet, he's willing to talk, but he's not willing to allow that Bozeman Trail, because he's already seen what the Oregon Trail, the Oregon California Mormon Trail, has done. They allowed that safe passage to come through, and the game was scared away from the trail. And the Powder River country is really the last good hunting grounds that's available at this time, to the point that the Lakota are invading territory that was owned by the Crow, that was recognized by the 51 Fort Laramie Treaty. And so they're pushing in on that, and they don't want the whites coming in disturbing the game. And so Red Cloud, he's not willing to back down. Now, at the same time this is going on, the government was so sure that they'd absolutely negotiate a peaceful deal and get the Bozeman Trail opened, that they're going to send Henry Carrington and the 18th Infantry with orders to proceed up the Bozeman Trail and establish 3 forts. What will become known as Fort Reno, Fort Phil Kearny, and Fort C.F. Smith. The locations are Fort Reno, I don't remember exactly. It's right on the Powder River, but I don't remember what the creek is in that one. Fort Phil Kearny is going to be up on Pino Creek, so up in the Bighorns, near where Story, Wyoming is now. And then Fort C.F. Smith will be established near the Yellowstone. And so Carrington is making his march, realizes that, hey, they're having this peace treaty going there. If I show up right now, that could be very detrimental to the peace treaty. So he or sends a telegram message back to his commander saying, hey, this peace treaty is going on. I don't want to disturb it. Can I stall here? And the reply is, continue with your march until told otherwise. And so Carrington is going to arrive at Fort Laramie right in the middle of negotiations. And Red Cloud becomes furious and famously states, and I'm going to paraphrase it, I don't have the quote exactly memorized, but basically states, you brought me here to negotiate, and before the red man has said yes or no to this trail, you already send the soldiers there to steal it. I will talk with you no more. Now we will fight. And I'll make the Bozeman Trail run red with blood. And he's going to hold true on that promise. And he's going to leave. And then the government, well, they managed to negotiate and get several tribes to sign this 1866 treaty That allows the Bozeman Trail. The problem is the natives that are going to sign that treaty are not the ones that are going to occupy that Powder River country. They're the ones that are staying close to Fort Laramie and also live primarily in the Nebraska area. And so the government tells Carrington, oh, the peace treaty signed. You don't have to worry about anything. Go ahead and go up there and build your forts. And Carrington's going to find out right from the get-go that's not the case. He starts having small skirmishes. Livestock is stolen. At one point, they find a horse with annuity goods from that treaty that the Indians intentionally leave behind. Basically says, yeah, here's your goods back. We're not going along with that treaty. And so Carrington proceeds up. He's going to stop and begin construction of Fort Reno. And Connor, during the 1865 campaign, had already started a post there. So really, he's going to continue on. He's just going to bear the name Fort Reno. He'll continue up, begin the establishment of Fort Phil Kearny. He'll pick the location there on Pino Creek, which is 4 miles from the Bighorns, in a nice flat spot in the bottom of a valley. Why he picked that, nobody really knows, but it was a good building spot. I mean, it's completely flat around in that area. And so, I shouldn't say completely flat, but he picked the flattest spot. And then he's going to send troops on to build Fort C.F. Smith. And then there's some redesignation, the 18th Infantry, which has three divisions, 3 corps. The corps start to get broke up and get redesignated and such because the Army's trying to downsize the military by taking big corps and making them smaller units. But Carrington's going to wind up making his headquarters at Fort Phil Kearny, and that's where he's going to operate from. And he begins construction first on palisade walls because he realizes that things aren't going well. They are not going to go well. And almost immediately, he starts writing letters back to his commanders and says, I'm out here with outdated muzzle-loading rifles. I really need to have the new breech-loading arms. Either send me Spencers or these new converted 50 caliber muskets. And, the Army says, yeah, they're coming. They're at Fort Laramie. Problem is Fort Laramie doesn't have that munitions. They haven't even arrived at Fort Laramie yet. And so Carrington limits target practice, focuses construction on defenses rather than living structures. And by the time you get closer to December, you still have men living in tents. And conflicts with the natives is going to keep intensifying. They're going to constantly attack the wood cutting details, hay cutting details. Any soldiers that go out to hunt in the area often don't come back. And if they do get found, there's not much left to really tell who they were. And this is going to continue on. And Carrington's officers are going to start to lose faith in him because Carrington's running a defensive campaign and he's got a bunch of young hotheads that want to run an offensive campaign. And the military back east wants Carrington to run an offensive campaign with outdated weaponry, with not enough ammunition, not enough supplies. And so Carrington does the best he can. William Fetterman is going to finally arrive at Fort Phil Kearny. And Fetterman and Carrington had been friends for a long time. But during the Civil War, Carrington had not been in the field. He had been called back for recruiting duties and such, whereas Fetterman had been in the field and had fought. And so all the young commanders in this had been fighting during the Civil War, and so they still got that aggressive juices going. And they start to become insubordinate. Basically, they have no faith in Carrington because they think they should be out there chasing the Indians instead of waiting for them to come to them. And Carrington, he's doing his best he can. And finally, on December 21st, the woodcutting detail is going to come under attack. Carrington orders Captain Tinike to go. Fetterman steps up and says, I would prefer to have the command. Carrington obliges him, sends him out, says, go relieve the woodcutting detail and return to the fort. Under no circumstance do you cross Lodge Trail Ridge. And then he's going to send Lieutenant Grumman, probably the most insubordinate of them all, with the cavalry in support of Fetterman. And he's going to repeat the orders 3 times to Grummond. Under no circumstance, do not cross the ridge. And the troops are going to arrive, relieve the woodcutting detail, and the next thing Carrington knows, there they go, across the ridge. And fighting starts to commence. And they can hear gunfire becoming more rapid. And Carrington orders Captain Tenike to form up another relief column to be ready to march, and sends Tenike out. And Tenike's going to arrive on the top of the ridge in time to see the mutilations being finished up. And he'll call in a howitzer, but at that point it's too late. The Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho are satisfied, and they're going to just travel back off to their winter camps. Then they're going to pack up and leave and go further up the Tongue, the Powder, and the Rosebud for their winter encampments. The Lakota do. The Cheyenne will wind up going into the Bighorns, and the Arapaho will head north up closer to the Yellowstone country. And so things are going to become quiet, but the damage is done. Carrington's going to foot the blame, even though he's been saying, I've got outdated weaponry, I don't have enough supplies, I don't have enough men, I can't run an offensive campaign. And the Army is going to use him as their scapegoat, and they're going to pull him back. They're going to send him to Fort Casper, which is where Platte River Bridge Station was at, the town of Casper, Wyoming now, where he'll be there, and then eventually the court of inquiry is going to find him at fault, and he's going to be kicked out. And eventually he will, later on, find that he wasn't at fault. He did give the command not to cross, and his subordinates, whether it was Fetterman or Grummond. I don't fully believe Fetterman fully disobeyed orders. Grummond had a couple weeks prior, on the December 6th, I think it was December 6th fight. And so I think probably what happened is Grummond took off, and Fetterman went up behind him. And so Carrington's going to be replaced. The Army's going to realize that, okay, this isn't going to be a peaceful situation. The natives that didn't sign the treaty are the ones that are living in this country, and then they start to move material, men, and supplies into the country. Now, after the Fetterman fight, most of what's going to go on for the spring through early summer is going to be small skirmishes. Basically, wood cutting details are going to get hit. Hay cutting details are going to get hit. Wagon trains are going to get hit to the point where it says, wagon trains have to have at least 100 men. Everybody's got to be armed heavily. And so this is going to continue on. And then in July, the new arms that Carrington had been begging for are finally going to arrive. And these are the second model Allen conversions. We don't have a first model to show. Unfortunately, we can't show them on here anyway.
Next week. The first model will get here finally.
But anyway, those second model Allen conversions that have been sleeved down to 50 caliber, 50-70 government cartridge are finally going to arrive at Fort Phil Kearny. And then some are going to be sent to Fort C.F. Smith. And the troopers are given cartridges. They're given drill, practice on the new arms. And the troops adapt to them pretty quick because it's a pretty simple process to run. But instead of stuffing everything from the muzzle, you come back to half cock like you're going to prime it. Go to half cock, flip that door open, drop a cartridge in, close the door, and you're ready to go. And so with that adaptation, now soldiers are able to fire at a more rapid rate, more equal to that of a bow and arrow, because the natives don't have a lot of guns during Red Cloud's war. They have very few guns. Most of the guns they're going to have through the rest of the war are going to be ones they took from the Fetterman massacre. And so the soldiers are issued these, and then on August 1st, 1867, about 9 months after Fetterman's going to get wiped out, Red Cloud is going to make his next move, his next big attacks. But this isn't just one attack in one spot. Red Cloud wants the people to, the government, the U.S. government, the Army, to realize he can hit them at multiple points at the same time. And so the Cheyenne, the Northern Cheyenne, the Arapaho, and a handful of Lakota are going to head to the Yellowstone to Fort C.F. Smith. And Red Cloud and his Oglalas and several other Lakota tribes are going to head down to Fort Phil Kearny for a dual strike. And on August 1st of 1867, they're going to attack a hay cutting detail at Fort C.F. Smith. 20 some odd men are going to be attacked by anywhere from 600 to 800 warriors. And basically what's going to happen with that is the men are going to fall back into a wagon box corral. And that's the funny thing about the wagon box fight and the hayfield fight, is that both of them had the wagon box rings. Because that was pretty common for a defensive. You had your little tent city outside of the wagon box. The wagon box essentially was their alibi. And so the troopers, the place is going to fall under attack. The troopers are going to make it inside the ring. There are going to be a handful of civilians there, 2 civilians, or excuse me, I think it's 3 civilians, armed with Henrys and Spencer repeaters, and all the troops that are there, and there's about 20 some odd total people. The troops there are armed with all these trapdoor, these new Allen conversions. And keep in mind, it's August, and even though it's in Montana, it's still pretty hot up there. And so one of the things that the soldiers complained about after the fact is that they were out in the sun and in a blue uniform, dark blue uniform that's made out of wool in the hot sun, and they don't have their head covers on because they're taking their hats off to stuff all these cartridges in. See, the Army had been reusing the old Springfield musket cartridge box, which if you're standing up or kneeling down, it works. What you're mostly in prone position, it's kind of a pain to manipulate that. So they wind up putting the cartridges inside their hats, and that way they've got them right there beside them so they can drop them in. And by luck or by proper planning, either way, at the wagon box location, they had stored, if I remember, it was like 7,000 rounds of ammunition. So these troopers are fairly well armed at this point compared to what Fetterman was. But most of them are still green recruits. There's a handful of veterans in there, and it's noted that several of the troopers are just wasting ammunition.
They've had like what? They've had like what, a week to train on these guns?
If that, yeah, maybe 2 weeks.
Not even that.
Maybe 2 weeks down at Fort Phil Kearny. And so the battle's going to start on, and what the natives have been used to is with the muzzleloaders is it's the same thing happened down in Texas with the Comanche, is that you can do a false charge, and sure, a few are going to get hit, but then while they're reloading their muskets, you go in with bows, arrows, hatchets, clubs, and you can wipe them out. No big problem. There's 20-some people here. This will be fast and easy. So the warriors charge in, false charge, and they think, all right, we got them. Next thing you know, another volley, and another volley, and another volley. And so they're thinking, okay, this is either there's more people in there than we thought or something has changed. And these men aren't exactly well protected. They are inside of wagon boxes, which is 1-inch plank wood. Mm-hmm. And at Fort C.F. Smith, the hayfield fight, those had been, I read a couple accounts said there was dirt packed up against those, so they were a little bit more protective. But pretty much you got troops laying in the boxes and shooting from inside the boxes. There's troops on the outside of the boxes shooting between the boxes. And for about 6 hours, 20 some odd men are going to hold off an attack of 800 warriors. And the warriors are going to do everything they can to get these men out. They're going to set fire to the hay that's been cut. They're going to set fire to the grass around it. And at one point, the fire gets so close to that wagon box corral that the soldiers figure they're done. and the flames that were coming, straight across, all of a sudden stop, make a wall 40 feet high, and the troops said they could feel the intense heat off of it, and then it burns out because the grass around that wagon box corral had been stomped down.
Very good. Very good.
And so, and when the natives come in and try to start other fires, soldiers jump out, pat it out, jump back in the box as fast as they can. Because at that point, the natives are starting to realize they're going to have to keep their distance because there's too much gunfire coming from that fortification.
Wow.
And so this fight goes on, and then the Cheyenne and the Arapaho decide, well, what do we do? And finally, one of the crew, which was a Private Bradley, volunteers to ride back to take word back to Fort C.F. Smith to Colonel Bradley, and this got confusing. I had to read that about 3 times to get it finally straightened out that it's Private Bradley, Colonel Bradley. Carry word back, and as he takes off, some Indians come out and start to follow him. Word does get back to the fort. The fort does send out relief with a howitzer, and once the natives see the howitzer coming, they're done. They pull out of there because they know that howitzer can really do some damage if it reaches out. And so that's going to bring about the end of the hayfield fight. And at the hayfield fight, there's going to be 2 dead on the Army side. On the native side, anybody's guess. Some estimates say several hundred, some estimates say 4 or 5. And so there's not a real clear number at that fight. The next day, on August 2nd, down at Fort Phil Kearny, the same thing, almost to a T, is going to happen once again. And so Red Cloud's warriors, along with Crazy Horse and several other chiefs, are going to attack the woodcutting detail, which is right up at the base of the Bighorn Mountains. And if you've never been there, when I say at the base of the Bighorn Mountains, there's a flat spot where the wagon box is, and then it just starts going this way, and about a quarter mile away. So they're going to come in, they're going to come down the hills and attack. They're going to attack the woodcutting detail. There's going to be more casualties here, a few more casualties, and most of them are going to be killed trying to get to the wagon box corral because they're about a mile away from where that corral is at. And so the wagon box corral here was the same thing. They'd taken the wagon boxes off for hauling wood because on a wagon, you don't haul wood inside the box. What you do is you pull that box off and you're left with a running gear, and you stack the wood on the running gear. And then you ride on top of the logs to drive the mules as you go in, or you ride one of the lead animals. So either way, and so instead of attacking the detail on its way to Fort Phil Kearny, they decide to attack where they're cutting the wood at. And so the attack's going to commence. All the troops, and this time it's about closer to 30 men, are going to fall back in to this wagon box. And one thing that's a little different here that wasn't mentioned at Fort C.F. Smith is that almost immediately the troopers have pretty well got it in their heads they're all going to die. And that's probably because at Fort Phil Kearny, they've still got it in their head what had happened to Fetterman. And some of them were probably there to see what had happened. And so men take laces out of their boots and they tie loops in them so that they can stick the gun in their mouth and use their toes to pull the trigger and basically prevent themselves from being captured. And in fact, one of the officers even tells them, save the last bullet for yourself. Don't let them mutilate you like they had done to Fetterman, even though most of the mutilations had happened after the men were dead anyway. And so the fight is going to go on almost identical, like I said, to what happened at Fort C.F. Smith, minus the bigger fire. And so troops are going to be firing, but this time, the plank boards, the wagon boxes don't have that dirt berm, and you're still going to have men laying in the boxes, shooting between the boxes. And at both ends of the corral, you have 2 wagons that are still fully mounted so that they can open the ends, if they need to. But the tent city's right there, and some of the soldiers realize that, hey, the natives can sneak up and get in that tent city and start shooting at us. So a couple troopers jump out and they go out and knock down all the tents so that they have a clear field of view. But the wagon box here is built closer on a ridge where it's going to drop off. And so a lot of Lakota snipers, essentially, as they call them, the snipers in the history books, are going to sneak up behind. And these ones do have guns, and they're going to try to take pot shots at the soldiers inside. But essentially the same thing's going to happen. Red Cloud is going to send in his first charge, expecting that, he's going to lose a few warriors to musket fire, and then he'll send in the main charge, and this will be done like that. Sends in the main charge, muskets fire, or sends in the false charge, muskets fire, send in main charge, met by musket fire, met by musket fire, met by musket fire. And so they go back and they kind of sit back to realize that maybe things aren't going all that well. And so this fight's going to last for about 8 hours. And once again, the natives are basically sitting back there scratching their heads saying, well, how the heck are we going to get in there? Because these 20, 30 some odd men, and it's true on both locations, 20, 30 some odd men are holding off 800 some odd Indians.
Out.
The proportion to that is greater in the Indians' favor than it was at the Fetterman fight. And so, if not, almost equal to, or not a little bit greater. So it's completely perplexes them. And so at the end of it all, really that's going to bring about the last offensives, major offensives that are going to happen during Red Cloud's war. And even though they're victories and the military is starting to gain foothold, the government is at the point of, we aren't going to fight any longer. It's time to negotiate. And so the following year is going to be focused more on bringing about the peaceful end to Red Cloud's war that'll wind up with the 68 Fort Laramie Treaty. And we'll probably have to get more into that on the next episode of this, because like I said, I didn't have a chance to get all caught up on the reading.
But Duke, didn't you know the trapdoor was the worst weapon they could have chose? It was obsolete the day it was adopted. It never won a battle.
Yeah, well, if it was trapdoors, rolling blocks, or sharps, I think the outcome would have been about the same.
Yeah, that's what I mean, though. Single-shot rifle, under the right circumstances, used correctly, will work.
Right.
Will do the job.
And what it comes down to, the native success was, or the native success prior to that had been, that there was no defensive structure, and most of the men were using muzzle loaders.
Mm-hmm.
The natives do not have the repeating weaponry. They don't have that many firearms. And the firearms that are being used at both C.F. Smith and at Wagon Box are the firearms that they got off of Fetterman and Grumman's men at the Fetterman massacre. And so they don't even have that much for ammunition. And then whatever weaponry they get off of raiding smaller parties or lone soldiers that went out hunting and such. But these men, they, or I should say, the natives, they didn't have that weaponry behind them. Now, in both of these fights, the civilians proved themselves, and is that Wagon Box, or excuse me, no, it was at Fort C.F. Smith, Hayfield fight. There was one, no, I'm getting it confused. It was Wagon Box. There was one guy there, one of the two places, one guy there that had both a Spencer rifle, actually had two Spencer rifles and a Henry. So this guy wasn't taking any chances wherever he was going. And he actually was one of the better shots at that. But, those guys proved what could be done with a repeating rifle. But at the end of the day, at the Wagon Box fight, had a few more casualties on the Army side. But for the native side, it's anybody's guess. Some say that there's 1,200 warriors. I'm more on the line. There's about 600 to 800 at both locations. because basically
Well,
what had happened is what had been at the Fetterman fight was about 1,200, and that force split.
Yep.
Um,
Honestly, though, when you're 20 guys, after it gets past about 200, it don't really make that much of a difference.
no, it doesn't, because what's the odds on that? 800 to 20 is
It's bad.
yeah. Somebody
But
give me the to 1 odds, because I can't even think of that, off the top of my
It
head.
just goes to show you nobody wants to die.
But if anybody's looking for a great resource, this one on the wagon box fight here is really good. And at the back of it in the appendix, it kind of lays out maps of everything that was going on there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really, really great resource. I wish there was one on Hayfield fight that was this good. But to be honest with you, I don't know that there has been that much archaeological.
I think
off the top of my head, I don't know.
I think Frontier Regulars has some on it, but I can't remember to be for sure. But yeah, I got it too. I love that book.
Yeah. But in reality, when you look at it, about half of it is the narrative, and half of it is the appendixes with sources and such. So, great resource. And that's kind of how that book on Adobe Walls is too.
Yeah. Oregon Outback said that was 40 to 1.
Yeah, 40 to 1. Those odds, they're just ridiculously outstanding. Yeah, let's see. There's casualties. 3 killed and 2 wounded inside the corral. So there was 3 men killed, whereas at CF Smith there was 2 men killed. And I think 2 or 3 or 4 wounded. So yeah, some said there was 1,500 Indians killed at Wagenbach. No way. Not going to happen, because that was more than what was there. And the thing of it is the Wagenbach fight was significant when it comes to firearms technology proving itself. But to the Lakota, it was so insignificant that Red Cloud couldn't even really remember the battle.
The next day?
Later in life.
Oh.
When he was asked about it, after being on the reservation, he's like, so either he really didn't remember it, or it was such a bad loss for him he didn't want to remember it. But
what I want to know is, why did he not change his strategy when he had just got beaten the day before and came in with the exact same strategy the next day?
Well, he wasn't at Hayfield.
Okay. That
no, he had went down there, so there's no way he could have been at Hayfield and then Wagon Box the next day. You could do it with a car now, but there's no way you would have done it back then, because there's a considerable amount of distance between the two.
Yeah, I always forget they don't got the telegraph.
Yeah, I'm gonna say right now it's like a 2-hour drive between the two, so figure that would be. You might do it, but yeah, and then you're gonna have and then one thing this points out too, this kind of fight is gonna happen again at Beecher Island.
Mm-hmm.
And then again at Adobe Walls. And so, yeah.
Then the one time they're going to catch him without cover, they make him pay.
Yep. So this one doesn't actually really okay, it says about 120 Indians were killed on the spot, and who knows how many were wounded and hauled off. But one chief, and now I'm having a brain fart as to where it was at, but one chief was killed. His body was captured by the soldiers. And I think it was at Hayfield, because they soldiers, after he's killed and the Indians kind of backed off, the soldiers cut his head off, and then they had it on display at the fort. And they also hacked him to pieces, kind of, I guess, as a retaliation for what had happened at the Fetterman fight. But for the most part, the native casualties, it's almost impossible to count, because they don't leave their casualties behind. So the whole no man left behind thing, they took that to heart, absolutely. And this was just one of those rare times where one did get left behind. They couldn't recover him, and the soldiers did the same to him that had been done to their comrades.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Want
trying
to go through some of these comments?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, we're gonna roll way up here. We're quite a ways back here. Let me see.
But yeah, it's worth noting, and I wasn't real clear on that, and I just happened to realize it as I was reading this. The first attack of the wagon box didn't take place at the wagon box; it took place outside. That the second attack was once they had gotten inside the corral.
Well, the highlight of the story for me was obviously the fire.
Right.
I've been on the fire department a long time. I faced some of those 40-foot walls, and in a modern fire truck with a tank of water behind you, you get the skin crawling up the back of your neck, and you want to leave then. I can't imagine what it'd been like. But of course, you have nowhere to go. So,
right.
All right.
One thing I'll just add right quick before we get into them is one of the things that I wanted to add is that during Red Cloud's War, this is where you start to really see the Henry repeaters really start to be used in conflict out on the plains, because two civilians with Fetterman both were carrying Henry rifles. There's one or two Henry rifles at Wagon Box. There's one or two Henry rifles at the Hayfield fight. And so the Henrys are starting to become more prevalent out here. Spencers are noted amongst the civilian populace as well. And so that firearms technology there is really starting to change. And so even though Red Cloud's War is going to wind up a victory for the Native Americans, the only time that they really win a victory that results in a peace treaty in their favor. If that had gone on a little bit longer and the government didn't decide to sue for peace, that really could have been the end of it then.
Yep. Red Cloud in the morning, wood crew take warning. Red Cloud at night, boxcar delight. Okay, I thought that one was pretty funny. I've been laughing about that one for a little bit. Ernie Pyle was embedded with the 18th Infantry 90 years later. Snapper said, okay, yeah, and they're talking about something else there. Eric Graves is in, and he said, Duke and I went out to Fort Reno a few years ago. It was in the middle of nowhere.
Yes, it was.
Is there anything there?
There's a monument there, and I found a picture of it afterwards, and when Eric and I was there, we found the foundation of a building, and you could tell there was a fireplace kind of in the center, long building. I found a picture, and I think I know what building it was. It was one of the barracks there. But yeah, it's right there on the Powder River. Really, it's a beautiful spot, even though it was smoky as heck. We couldn't see a lot. But the main thing that's there is a big concrete monument in the middle of a cow pasture. That's it.
Gina Woods is here. She said, howdy. William Saucer said, officers always say that, not enough, etc. Always kill a traitor before an enemy. I don't remember what that was in regards to. Gray Pilgrim said, I have read the source material, but Dukes makes it live.
Yep.
Gina Wood said, I always enjoy watching these. And Gray Pilgrim said, have an Allen conversion that was cut short by Bannerman. They are quite different than the 1873. Yeah, they have the horseshoe. They have the horseshoe ejector spring, but that's because they have no receiver, which is one of the biggest differences. No, that's literally just a trap door, silver soldered and screwed right to the top of the barrel with a hole cut in it.
Yep.
Snapper said, I agree. Gray Duke is a very good storyteller. And Gray Pilgrim said, Duke should record his tales and sell it. Kind of what he's doing right now.
Yeah.
Just not making any money.
Nope.
Donald Benson's in. He said, how's everyone tonight? I'm down at the NSSA Nationals this weekend, North-South Skirmish Association. Cool. I hope that's going well for you. Gray Pilgrim said, green troops used to front stuffers. Yep. And they're all welcoming Donald Benson. William said, this is the highlight of my week. And they were talking. This came out about the time you were talking about the fire. He said, certainly made for a hairy situation.
Yeah.
Gray Pilgrim said, talk about a cliffhanger.
But yeah, no, it's you know, at both of those, none of those men expected to come out of it alive. And they fought so hard because they were going to take as many with them as they could.
Snapper said, wow, that is a crazy fight. And Justin Kuhn said, mighty fine shindig. Gray Pilgrim said he's glad he wasn't there that day. And yeah, guys, Snapper was sick for the last couple weeks and he's doing better. So they were talking about that. We're almost down here.
Glad you're doing better, Snapper.
He said he felt like he was on the Oregon Trail video game, if you know what I mean. Yep. And William said that light cavalry is useless against an improved position. Yeah.
Yep. And see, that's one of the things that reasons why, you know, Fetterman probably was wiped out is because that spot, you know, even though it was a high ground, was completely indefensible.
Both him and Custer.
Yeah. Yeah. And Custer, you know,
he didn't have a blade of grass.
No. And I don't even think if he'd had wagon boxes, he'd have been able, because even though he had 200 some odd or 500 some odd men, whatever it was.
Only 225 with him.
Yeah, there was a lot of angry people on the other side, and they all had repeating arms at this point. So wagon box wouldn't have done him a darn bit of good.
A true case of don't poke the bee's nest.
Yeah.
Okay. Gray Pilgrim said, love the fort books. Garrett sent me one that got me interested. Yeah, those are in every little fort I go around here. They're pretty good little books.
Yeah.
Now, Duke will probably tell me they're all full of bad information, but I liked them. You know, I'm talking about the little fort books.
Oh, little ones that are picture books?
Yeah, and they're not little paperbacks. They're 20-page. Like, they're pretty good. Let me see if I can see one here. Used to have. Yeah. These.
Oh, I've never read those.
Oh, well, they're in Fort Larned. I thought they were in Fort Laramie, too. They got one for every fort.
Oh, no, we don't have them.
Huh. Almost down here. Mm-hmm. Stephen M. Mann said he's going to make a video on making a brass ramrod tomorrow. And Louisiana Gray said, we do appreciate your free presentation. Soylent Green said, like dime novels. So he's in. Hi, Soylent. Man, we're caught up. Man, you got that done in less than an hour. You're rolling tonight.
Yeah, well, the plan was to have it all, but my week just didn't pan out.
Yeah, it must be the pants situations got you really hopping.
Well, that and I got to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, so kind of wanted to run through it quick. But yeah, so I have no idea what's going to happen on the next Tales of the Trails. More than likely, we're going to do a third part of Red Cloud's War, which is finally kind of talk about the peace treaty and such, and finalize that. And then after that, so what is the next date 2 weeks out, Garrett?
Okay, here's the thing. We got our show for 2 weeks in a row.
Okay.
We got Small Caliber Arms Review next week, and then the week after that, we have Jay Wheeler on the 3rd. And after that, we officially had Tom Tobin, but that's obviously farther down the line now.
Right.
But it looks like that's going to be, by the time we get to that, it'll probably be either very late June or early July. I haven't scheduled anything out there because I don't know when I'm coming back. We, on the 11 Bang Bang channel, guys, of you that haven't been around for very long, our year ends the first part of June. And we start our next season, you might say, in July, because we usually go on harvest, even though harvest's not that big this year. And so we don't do live streams, videos. A lot of times we won't even have a chance to answer comments and stuff. And then we come back in July, regroup. So probably won't be a lot going on in June. Snapper might take over some of it. We've talked about it, seeing if he can take over our part on the lives, but
what I was gonna say I got going, because I think it's in 2 weeks. I've got fur trade event going on the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Top of that, my schedule's changing. You're gonna be busy. So I'm thinking probably 1st of July is sounding better for the next Tales of the Trails.
Yeah, it's going to be right around in the 1st of July. We'll figure that out.
And the main reason, if anybody's wondering why I'm doing this with Garrett, is because I'm doing this all through my phone. And so it's easier that he sets it up on his end and does it because he can watch the chat and see what's going on. I can't do that as easy on my end and do all this talking and such. And even with, I've got folks that are set as moderators, I don't have any guarantee that they're going to be there through that whole thing. And so this just works better this way. For me, until I can finally ever get a laptop that runs pretty good again, that's just going to be the way it is. Yeah. And on top of that, I got a lot going on. Like I said, I got stuff going on at work. So this is about my last free weekend. Because starting tomorrow, I go back to working weekends. And for the next 2 weeks, I've got an opening shift on weekends, which, is not the worst thing in the world. I could still run a stream in the afternoon. But like I said, Garrett's got a couple coming up. And then I've got fur trade event going on, and then I go back into the late night shifts. So that means I'm going to be probably we're going to wind up shifting this thing to a Wednesday or a Thursday evening.
Yeah.
More than likely a Wednesday evening. No, can't do that. You got church.
Well, it'll work out one day, Wednesday or Thursday. But the main thing is we're all going to regroup in July. So
yeah,
we'll be back.
So I think the whole June off, that's gonna. Yeah. And I might come on and do something fun, like one of those small live streams, but I'm not gonna be doing anything major.
Yeah, and we're gonna move whenever we get back. We'll probably be moving all the streams to the middle of the week because we can't do it without you. So that's just that.
And on top of that, I got the leather business to run, and I'm so far behind on that right now. It's not even funny. So as of today, I got one guy that sent me an email yesterday. If he gets back, I want to take his order. But as of today, I'm not gonna really. If you want to send an order, that's fine, but don't expect it much before December.
He's a winter sower.
Yeah. Few reasons for that is one, with this job, I just don't have that much time, and two, I'm going to order a hide here probably in the middle of June. And I got enough orders that I don't even know if I'm going to have any leather left after I get, because that's what happened on the last one, is I ordered one hide and it was gone before I'd even been in my house in one day. I'd already had it cut into the order. So, and I've got orders backlog clear back to January. Things are going to be moving at a snail pace. Right now I've got a guy that's getting 6 holsters from me. He's kind of needing them on top of the list, and I'm letting him move up on the list. I usually don't do that, but I'm letting him move up on the list because these holsters are going towards the Sharps rifle that I'm looking at. And he's giving me he's going to pay me a pretty penny for moving them up that fast. But the ones I'm working on now, I got a bunch over here in a tub that I just need to stitch. Soon I'll get those out. Garrett, one of them or 2 of them are yours.
Yeah.
I just got to get caught up. But
yeah,
I got one over here that I need to finish up a mag carrier for Slick 6 guns and get that out. I promised him I'd have that done this week, and that didn't happen.
Well, let's go through a few more of these comments here. By Landon C said Custer didn't kick the hornet's nest. He tried to wear it for a hat.
Yeah. That's one way of putting it.
Stephen M. Mann said 7 a.m. Good grief, up 5 every morning.
Yeah, well, I tend to wake up between 5:30 and 6:30, but I usually put it on snooze, the alarm clock, until about 6:45. But yeah, being as I got to be at work at 7, I'm half hour away. I'll be leaving at 6. So I got to be waking up at about 5:30.
Yeah. Well, I tend to call you around 6:30 and forget you're an hour
Yeah,
or behind.
but that's usually when I have to get up and go to the bathroom in the morning anyway. So I just get up and stay up.
It's going to be a hard month. How you get by? There's lots of good con stuff out there. Speaking of which, by Land and Sea, maybe he'll be putting out some stuff in June too.
Yeah. I know I promised Tom Tobin on there too, but I just haven't think of that. Is they've been at work, they keep telling me I look like California Joe Milner. And I guess I really do look like him. So we may be doing fitting one of those in here on the next episode too.
Yeah. William said at Red Cloud conducted classic guerrilla war. Well, here's the thing. When you outnumber an enemy 40-1, you generally think your odds are pretty good.
Yeah, and he wasn't running a conventional war in the native perspective, because for the natives, there's the fighting season, there's the hunting season, there's the staying alive to get through the winter season, followed by the spring hunting season, followed by the fighting season. So the summer is usually the season for fighting, and I've been told by Afghan war veterans that things are pretty similar over there too. There's a time of the year where a lot of the fighting is done. In the wintertime, the Indians hardly ever fight in the wintertime because that time's just spent trying to survive the winter. And Red Cloud is going to run his war and have one of his greatest victories in the wintertime, when it was least expected. Yeah. So he was fighting an unconventional war by their terms.
Yep. Louisiana Gray said, I do understand harvest time. I used to live on a sugarcane plantation. Gina Wood said, so Duke, where are your pants? Drying. You must have missed the part where he fell in the river.
No, I didn't. I didn't fall in the river. I rolled around in dirt. Then I was down by the river rolling around the grass, and the dirt that was on my pants got wet. And yeah, when I took my pants off, my legs were just brown and muddy looking. I'm like, I'm not gonna. I was fishing in the river a lot.
Snapper said, LOL, yep, Garrett, official channel manager of Duke Frazier Productions, 11 Bang Bang, Snappers, Antique Firearms. Well, I'm pretty poor channel manager because you guys don't get any videos turned out very often. You got to have footage.
The time to make them.
Yeah. Let's see. Plains Indians were the victims of their own traditional style of warfare.
Well, in a sense, that's... Yeah, I don't know if I fully agree with that or not.
It requires some thinking on my part.
Yeah, because really what it comes down to is they just didn't have the technology. So it wasn't their style of warfare. Their style of warfare actually was pretty superior.
Depending.
Considering that, it's a guerrilla war. Guerrilla warfare and European Napoleonic tactics.
Yeah.
The guerrilla warfare is superior. And we've seen that in Afghanistan too, It
depends. If you're Colonel Miles that shows up with Hotchkiss guns against Setting Bull, that's a whole different at that point, at that point tactics gotta change.
Right. But once the natives got repeating arms, guess what? Their tactics are superior once again. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why Red Cloud didn't want to fight when it came to the 1876, is because he realized that, they couldn't really win. It was at that point, get the best deal you could get. It's like, once the natives got repeaters, they proved that their tactics were the superior tactics.
By
It's
land
just
and
that the
sea,
technology and the weaponry made the difference.
Duke, feel like trying your hand at Remington Lee double belt.
We'll think about it.
Kind of back on that tactics thing, though. I don't know, because when did they ever win when the tactics were sound? When they had a good leadership on the United States side. It's just a thought.
I mean, Rosebud Battle is a pretty good example of when, things equaled out. And I mean, in reality, it's still a kind of a native victory because they checked and turned Crook back. But it
With
wasn't
massive
because,
numbers, though.
but the thing was, they didn't turn Crook back because they outfought him. They turned Crook back because Crook used up half of his ammunition.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so, really, strategically, it was a native victory. In reality, from a military sense and body count, it's a draw. You have pretty much the same killed on and wounded on both sides. So yeah, that's one of those where the guerrilla warfare and the military tactics, they balanced.
My other thing would be, when you look at the same exact situation, obviously there's a few things different, but the natives take Custer. Natives don't take Benteen. Benteen's dug in.
Benteen stopped and dug in.
Obviously, they were further away from the camp, too, so they didn't feel like they had as much to protect there. But at the same time, I feel like it's awful. A lot of it's on the commander's shoulders.
Right, too. And Custer never had a chance to even try to dig in because he got overwhelmed. I mean, if Benteen and Reno had been together and they could have held longer on that initial charge, things might have turned around. But the thing is Benteen wasn't there because Benteen was following orders. Reno got routed and suffered from shell shock. And if he hadn't been routed, he would have been wiped out. A lot of people blame and say that it was the fault of Reno and Benteen, so why Custer got wiped out. Well, if Reno and Benteen had been on the hill with Custer, they'd have died too.
Yep. It wouldn't have mattered what guns they had or how many were there. It would have,
because
it's a bad situation.
It wasn't a fact of, Custer just being outnumbered. The tactics, he was outclassed. At that point, outgunned. Because at that point, almost all the natives had repeating arms.
Yes, but even if his guys had repeating guns, just like you said, if all the guys had been there, it wouldn't have made a bit of difference.
Wouldn't have made a bit
too fast, too high.
If he'd had the 2nd Cavalry there, wouldn't have made very much difference. Yep. If he'd had the Gatling guns, absolutely made all the difference because they'd have slowed him down to the point he wouldn't arrive there in time to find Sitting Bull. If he'd have waited one day, like Terry told him to. If he'd have waited one day, Terry and Gibbon would have been there.
Yep.
And
maybe
if Crook hadn't turned around, who knows? Crook might have took care of it beforehand because Crook had 1,400 men.
Yeah.
So that's would have been, and like I said, they'd already met at the Rosebud. They'd already checked each other. And so that would have been, more equal terms battle. But it's one of those things that you can judge history all you want to, but the thing about judging history is that no matter how you judge it, it ain't going to change.
Nope.
You just have to look at it and realize that, if frogs had wings, they wouldn't bump their butts every time they jumped. But the fact of the matter is they do. It's happened, it's done. All we can do is learn from it.
Yep. Very much. And the military did learn from it because they didn't lose again.
No, not really. And, they're going to replace, during 76, they're going to replace those 12-pound mountain howitzers. They use muzzle stuffing cannons clear up into the 70s. And in 76, they'll eventually replace them with the Mountain Hotchkiss, which is the first breech loading artillery piece really used by the United States. And when I say breech loading, it's metallic cartridge, and it looks like a 40 millimeter shell.
Miles made good use of those.
Yeah, Miles used it to great effect, and that thing was a very effective round, more effective than that muzzle stuffing 12-pound mountain howitzer, because mountain howitzer, when you have the exploding ordnance, it's got a Borman fuse in the front. Those fuses, they could go off on time. They might go off late. They might go off early.
In the cannon?
They might go off in the cannon. And they might go out to 900 yards. They might go out to 800. They were not that reliable, which is why cannons, the only time they're really effectively used is in defense or in offense against a village. And so once that Mountain Hotchkiss comes out, it's like those shells go off pretty much when they're meant to go off. And the fact that it can rapid fire, in reality, you could fire it faster than you could a muzzle loading rifle, but not as fast as, you could reload a trapdoor, because you got to run a swab through, throw a shell in, cool a barrel. But it was a lot faster. And then when they come out with that revolving Hotchkiss, one goes boom, 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 boom. That kind of similar to the one in Red Dead Redemption 2. That one is extremely deadly. So technology was changing, and those technological changes were really what made the difference.
Diane Houston has a good question. She said, "What revolvers were they using?"
There was a lot of mention of Colts up at, I assume you meant during Hayfield and Wagon Box. The civilians had Colts.
You're talking 1860s and 51s.
Yeah. The troopers were infantry, and so they don't have revolvers. There was the one civilian I mentioned had like 2 Spencers and a Henry. He also had a couple of Colts that was mentioned too. So, and then
once you have a breech loader, the need for the revolver diminishes quite considerably.
Yeah. But one of the things they mentioned in there is that the guy with all the guns could fire his Colt as fast as a native could fire his bow. And reality, that's not fanning, but that's boom, 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 boom. So,
yeah. Snapper said nobody wants to be cold and fight a war. And Gina Wood said, agreed, Snapper. Williams said that tactics are a deeper subject than we can engage here. Might have to have its whole own show someday.
Yeah. Well, like I said, those hit and run tactics. Well, in reality, hit and run tactics have proved themselves for recorded history. Natives used them to great effect. The Japanese used them kind of to good effect. In Vietnam, guerrilla warfare, hit and run. Well, Korea was more of, throw out a couple 100,000 out. That was more Russian tactics. And then the Iraq and Afghan war, hit and run tactics. Come in, hit, and get out of there. And if it wasn't for the fact, Apache helicopters and all that, they'd come in and mop things up. It would be really hard, if not impossible, to fight a lot of that.
Yep.
And there's a great movie out there. Can't remember what it's called now, but it's got Clint Eastwood's son in it.
Scott Eastwood, but I don't know what he's in.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a great movie about this little outpost. I think it's called Outpost Keaton. The Outpost is the movie. The Outpost. There's a great movie about that, where it talks about this outpost they put down the bottom of the valley. And if you watch that, you kind of can feel and see what Carrington had going on and what could have happened if Red Cloud would have come down on Fort Phil Kearny. Because really, yeah, when I watched that, that's where I drew that connection. It's like, wow, that really puts it into perspective. Is that, yeah, you send out these guys, they can get hit from all sides on terrain. These guys, then, the enemy can get away real quick. And really, it's kind of the same thing that was going on during Red Cloud War.
AR American's in. He said, good evening.
All right.
And let's see. Yeah, William said they got a little too much rain in the outback Colorado 8-inch mud roads right now.
We wound up with 3 inches up here. And we're starting to dry out a little bit. But, yeah, we're going to be getting some more rain here in the next coming weeks, I'm sure. They're talking up here that the month of June is going to be a very wet month.
Yep. By Landon C said, I'd love to have a 37 millimeter evolving Hotchkiss cannon someday.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we're friends. When you get it, let me know.
I'd love to get a non-firing replica out at Fort Laramie, because we've got an original on display, but to show the difference between the two types of artillery, because we fire the 12-pound mountain howitzer. Love to get us a Napoleon to fire, but we don't have the budget for it. But like to get just an aluminum cast, milled out, look just exactly like a Hotchkiss, fully functional except for firing, so that we can do our talks and we can show how they can be fired and such. But I don't want to have to deal with the ATF paperwork, because that would be considered a destructive device, I think, even if you designed it to fire blanks. So, and the Park Service really doesn't have a firing training thing for that anyway. But it'd be fun to be able to at least demonstrate it.
Yep. Doug Duke said weapons are tactics. William
true in a way, yeah.
Warfare must be combined with diplomacy. Red Cloud needed to stay in the field as long as possible and negotiate.
Which is exactly what he does.
Should have avoided major contact. He overcommitted the boxcar. You see, the thing is, we haven't finished the story yet. Red Cloud's going to win.
He is.
Red Cloud's going to hands down win this fight. When it's all said and done, the U.S. is going to vacate the Bozeman Trail.
Because in reality, when it's all said and done, in reality, the victories for the U.S. at the hayfield and the wagon box were insignificant. Absolutely insignificant. Even though, there could be up to 120 natives killed, that was a small little group. They were little small battles that just got out of hand. Red Cloud had won his absolute biggest victory when he wiped out Fetterman, when he wiped out 80 men in 20 minutes.
He put fear in the minds of the people coming west.
Yep. And he had it going for him at that point. And he got the government talking peace. And even though he didn't really win Wagon Box and Fort C.F. Smith, he really has still got him trying to make peace, trying to negotiate. And so the Army is going to have to close down the Bozeman Trail. It's going to have to close down the forts. Red Cloud's going to burn the forts to the ground. And then he'll come in and sign that peace treaty.
But Setting Bull would agree with you, William. I can't even use the quote Setting Bull used to talk about Red Cloud.
Well, you could. You're on my channel, but your mom might
something
be
about something about a squaw that the U.S. had their way with.
Yeah, and that comes from the that book and later movie, Bury My Heart,
Wounded Knee.
I don't know if he actually said that or not.
Well, I've read it as a true quote in other places, so I didn't know.
Right. I haven't come across it yet. So, But yeah, Red Cloud is going to come out victorious at the end of this. So, in reality, the wagon box is not significant in that fact. It's significant in showing that the firearms technology changing was significant, but not enough to win the war on the United States' favor. And even if they had, start doing offensive, that breech loader is not going to make that much difference when they get out in the field. Because really what it comes down to is Red Cloud attacked, and the Northern Cheyenne and Arapaho, they attacked defensive positions. Had they sent troops out into the field against those muskets, well, guess what? That trapdoor, that Allen conversion, basically the parent of the 1873 trapdoor that's going to be used by Custer. And guess what? They pretty much came out victorious in most of those contacts as well.
Superior numbers would beat it, but I still wouldn't lay that all at the foot of the trapdoor. Like I said, if you gave every one of Custer's guys 73 Winchesters, I still don't think they'd have come out any better than they. Yeah. They may have took a few more people with them, but they would not have come out any better.
No, because what it really comes down to, the biggest detriment to U.S. That caused the U.S. to have such few victories in the field is that troopers weren't really trained for marksmanship. They weren't really trained heavily in combat. Soldiers were trained to make sure they could operate the gun. And there was an account from Little Bighorn of a guy that just sit there and pop shells in and out of his gun. Never fired him, but he ran that action beautiful. Marksmanship was not a thing. You got 3 rounds a year for target practice. That was what the Army wanted you to use. Now, Carrington tried to have more target practice down at Fort Phil Kearny. And when they got the new trapdoors in, they had more target practice. Because as general rule of thumb, 3 rounds a year is all you're going to really train with. So, yeah, you don't have the sharpest shots. Basically, you've got a cheap labor force, and that's what most of these soldiers did. Most of their duty was doing cheap labor that has very little combat experience, and you throw them out there. And in reality, like I said, the change in tactics, firearms did have an effect on tactics because Red Cloud wasn't expecting that rapidity of fire, but that was one contact for Red Cloud, one contact for the Northern Cheyenne up at Fort C.F. Smith. So,
and the military learned their lesson because 2 times they went into the field in battle at that point. They did later on with Miles, and they did down with the Apaches a couple times. But the only 2 times they went and got beat was when, like you said, they charged into the field of fire, into the battle. But when you look at it, they were pretty successful in the Yellowstone campaign. They were definitely successful at Washita. A lot of times, it works in their favor, but surprising. But like you said, a pitched battle, no, don't go out there and do that. You're outnumbered.
Right.
But anyway.
But yeah, and the other thing that hurt, was when they attacked villages and burned villages. And then the Indians, the other thing that was detrimental to the Indians is the fact that they couldn't stay together in big numbers for long periods of time.
Oh, yeah, you got to eat.
Yeah, and when they broke up, that's when the Army got them. Not when they were in big bands, but when they were broken up. Because after the Custer battle and they start to break up, Crook is going to chase him and then wind up hitting American Horse's village up at Slim Buttes. They're going to attack smaller other villages through the end of 76 and into the spring of 77. You have the Dull Knife fight. You'll have several other ones. Sitting Bull escape into Canada. Yeah. And the military didn't have a lot of resources at the time to field really enough soldiers to get them all at once. But yeah, they they were basically hit when they were in small bands.
Yep. Almost sounds like Sound Tactics. Circling back. But you said the Indians were raised on warfare. That's pretty well all we got. Or you want to go for a little while longer? We just hit an hour 30.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to shut her down here because I'm gonna have to get to bed because that 5:30 alarm's gonna come pretty early.
Yep. All right. So you want to give them a few more minutes or just call it good?
Yeah, we'll give it a couple minutes here to kind of do our little outro statement. So, what do you all got coming up tomorrow?
A list. I'm doing a list video. Top 6 firearms from 1800 to 1860. In my opinion.
Okay.
And they have to be guns I have experience with. So.
Gotcha. And I'll do another video someday. I don't know when. I'll get one done eventually.
Johnny Reb and Billy Yank have probably got all kinds of ideas hatching in your head.
I'll kind of show you next.
Oh, you got your hat?
My Johnny Reb hat got mailed to me. I got to order a new Billy Yank hat because I didn't have them send it because the hat that I was using was a little kid's cappy that I have had for years.
Well, you ain't no Yankee. I understand that.
So I'm going to have to get a cappy for that. But eventually, we're going to have some more Billy Yank and Johnny Reb. It's basically going to come down to when I have some free time to just dink around. But tomorrow, like I said, I go to work early. I get home later in the afternoon, and then I've got some leather stuff I've got to get done. I said Slicks, I got to get some stuff done for him. I got to get some stuff done for my friend who's selling me the sharps. Yeah, it's just going to be busy. So I don't know exactly when the next Tales of the Trail is going to be, but it'll be sometime probably July.
Yep.
And unless Garrett gets a free weekend towards the end of June.
You never know, something might happen.
Yeah,
I like to take the whole month off because I always figure 11 months of us is enough. People get tired of it.
But by then, maybe I'll have some more read up on, and when we can really finish out Red Cloud's War on a bang.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, we're gonna shut her down for there. I want to thank everybody for coming on. Like I said, next one will be in sometime in end of June, early July. And we'll do episode 3 of Red Cloud's War. And then after that, we'll eventually get to Tom Tobin and the Santa Fe Trail at some point, and several others. So
we've got our whole lives ahead of us.
We got our whole lives. In the words of Johnny Reb, we only got the rest of the war.
Exactly.
So anyway, I want to thank y'all for joining in. Y'all stay safe out there. Stay tuned and keep your powder dry.